Discover how an arrogant millionaire's challenge led to an amazing, transformative dance surprise. Jake stood in the dim light of his studio, feeling the weight of expectation settle onto his shoulders like the worn-out dance shoes that lay scattered on the floor. The walls that once echoed with laughter now reverberated with silence. Just yesterday, at the Community Arts Gala, Victor, whose opulence dripped from every tailored suit and sparkling cocktail, had taunted everyone within earshot. Success requires money, people. Talent is overrated. His words stabbed at the very core of Jake's identity, leaving him grappling with an anguish he had yet to fully understand. How could wealth dictate talent? Doubts gnawed at him, like moths on frayed fabric. If the worth of his dance studio diminished like an old photograph fading in sunlight, what did it make him? A simple dance instructor holding on to relics of dreams. As the community reveled in the festivities around them, Jake's heart sank deeper. The familiar rhythm of his mother's nurturing spirit lingered in the corners of the studio, haunting and encouraging all at once. Was he truly not enough? What could he possibly offer in a world where capital drowned creativity? It was just another Saturday evening when it began, a subtle revolution, sparked by a desperate hope. Fueled by a blend of irritation and determination, Jake pondered Victor's challenge. Perhaps he could show that passion could outshine dollar signs. Would that be enough to silence the snickers from the affluent, those who danced to the beat of cold, hard cash? Or was he chasing shadows while the world grafted them more gold? Seeking kindred spirits, he gathered a motley crew. Sarah, with dreams of graceful pirouettes stifled by family expectations. Miss Clara, her sparkle dimmed by time and health, flickering like an old stage light. Let us show them, Jake declared, drawing from a well of courage he didn't know he possessed. The initial rehearsals fluttered with uncertainty, and yet they also wove moments of joy. Dancing became an awakening. Piecing together their lives, they forged connections, revealing hidden insecurities and forgotten aspirations. Everyone seemed to transform before him, but with each breakthrough, doubt loomed like a storm cloud. Could they pull it off? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As rehearsals intensified, an anonymous note fluttered through the door, a whisper of sabotage hanging in the air. Give it up, Jake. You're wasting your time. It felt like a betrayal seeping into the heart of their fragile unity. He hesitated, wrestling with thoughts that swirled chaotically. Was he leading them toward glory, or deluding them into chasing after Victor's empty ideals? The final rehearsal descended into turmoil. The music grew dissonant, movements chaotic. Anguish dripped from their performances, and doubt clawed at Jake's spirit. He stood in the center, paralyzed, as fragments of hopelessness invaded his being. Were they just shadows of an ideal? Was he leading them to ruin? As tension thickened like fog, Miss Clara's voice cut through the chaos, recalling a buried truth about Victor's past. Suddenly, everything felt even heavier, each piece of the puzzle clamoring for his attention. What had he stumbled into? With nothing left but the challenge ahead, Jake felt the stakes rising higher. The rhythm of his heart quickened. He could no longer remain a bystander. The moment of transformation was near, but what would it demand from him? Jake stood at a precipice, facing not only his rival but the very essence of his dreams. The silence in the studio was suffocating, amplifying the storm within Jake. He felt the weight of every doubt pressing down, pushing against his chest. In a moment of panic, he stilled his breathing, seeking clarity amidst the chaos that surrounded him. What did Clara mean by bringing up Victor's past? There had to be more to that story, a thread to hold on to in this storm of uncertainty. Gripping the edge of the rehearsal table, he steadied himself. The new knowledge hovered on the edge of his mind, teasing him with the possibility of a strategy. Perhaps Victor's own struggles would become a mirror to reflect his arrogance back at him, a vulnerability, an opportunity. But could he exploit that effectively without losing sight of his values? He turned to his dancers, who were waiting, their anxious eyes scanning his face for reassurance. They needed him. He had to weave their individual hopes into a tapestry strong enough to challenge Victor's disdain. But how? All right, everyone, Jake said, his voice firm yet inviting. Let us take a moment to refocus. I believe in what we're trying to create here, and we must carry that into our movement. Sarah nodded, her youthful passion ignited by his words, while Miss Clara's eyes sparkled with a renewed sense of purpose. As they gathered closer, Jake saw a flicker of determination in each of them. They were not just dancers. They were warriors in their own stories, ready to defy the conventional notions of success that Victor represented. In the corner, he spotted a stack of old, worn-out notebooks filled with ideas, sketches, and snippets of choreography he had collected over the years. It hit him, then a radical idea sparked like a match in a dark room. They would include narratives in their dance, telling the stories behind each dancer in a way that no one could dismiss. They would demonstrate that creativity could outshine material wealth. Let us dig deep, he urged. What do we each want to express about ourselves? What fears do we need to dance away? What victories await us? As they delved into personal stories, the atmosphere shifted. Each dancer's vulnerability became a strength, and the choreography morphed into a vivid portrayal of resilience. Jake integrated movements that mirrored the essence of their narratives, creating a performance that resonated with authenticity. But in the midst of their progress, shadows lurked. The more deeply they shared, the more Jake felt the weight of their stories, their fears of judgment, their vulnerabilities exposed. He sought to uplift them, yet every wave of doubt washed over him, reminding him of Victor. Would passion really be enough in a world where capital dictated the value of art? With the final performance looming, the anonymous note haunted him. It felt like a predator, lurking just beyond reach. Jake knew he needed to confront this fear head-on. He could no longer let Victor's voice dictate the narrative. With newfound resolve, he took Clara aside and probed deeper into Victor's past. Tell me what you know, he insisted, urgency propelling his words. This could be our advantage. As she opened up about Victor's struggles and failures, a vivid picture began to form. Jake saw now not just a rival, but a flawed man who hid behind wealth and bravado. More importantly, this revelation ignited something within him, a fire to fight against the very values Victor had propped up with sneers. In the fading lights of the studio, Jake faced the mirror, reflecting back a man remade, fearful yet determined. He was not just a dance teacher. He was a storyteller poised to challenge a narrative drenched in denial. The gears of battle were in motion. But as he and Clara plotted their next move, a door creaked open. Victor stood there, imposing, with a smug grin that sated his arrogance. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This was the confrontation he had been dreading but could no longer avoid. The time had come to face not just Victor, but his own convictions and the very essence of his dreams. Jake clenched his jaw, summoning the steely resolve that had been building within him. Victor's presence loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to eclipse the light emerging from their creative venture. This was the moment he had anticipated but never truly prepared for. Every ounce of Jake's courage was now tested in the face of Victor's condescension. Nice studio you have here, Jake, Victor sneered, his eyes scanning the modest space as if evaluating its worth. Still playing the idealist, are we? The dismissive tone sliced through the air, but Jake steadied himself, drawing upon the energy of his dancers behind him. We're not done yet, Victor. We have something unique to share with the world. Unique? You mean irrelevant? Victor shot back, crossing his arms. Art is about impact and influence, not some over-sentimentalized parade of feelings. A pulse of defiance surged within Jake. Victor's words, though laced with arrogance, unveiled his own fears and insecurities. Impact, he thought, was subjective. What mattered was meaning. Your version of success doesn't resonate with everyone, he countered, voice bridging both challenge and invitation. Some of us believe in the power of authenticity. There it was, a glimmer of something potent, clarity in conflict. Jake realized that this wasn't merely about challenging Victor's definition of success. It was about redefining his own and inspiring his dancers to explore their potential unapologetically. Victor uncrossed his arms, intrigued, though his smirk remained. Authenticity is a nice buzzword, but when the lights go down, Who's going to pay for that authenticity? Jake shot a glance at his dancers. Their excitement had shifted to uncertainty, eyes darting from him to Victor. It was the perfect moment to galvanize their collective resolve. If we compose a dance that reveals our stories, he began, his conviction strengthening as he spoke. The heart behind our movement becomes our price, and that can never change. Victor leaned in, clearly amused. You think a bunch of sob stories will resonate with an audience? You need skill, training, and in heart. Jake cut him off, a new fire igniting in his chest. We're not just performing. We're creating an experience that speaks to the human condition. Our stories are our strength. The words thrummed through Jake, each syllable mapping out a new landscape of belief. If Victor represented everything he rejected, then he mustn't just dismantle that facade. He needed to construct something transformative, something that would echo through the hearts of those who witnessed it. Victor's face faltered briefly, his bravado flickering. When you fail, and you will fail, you'll realize that mere passion won't feed your dreams. The underlying threat was plain, yet Jake felt a strange calm wash over him. Failure. He would face it on his own terms. But first, he had to win this moment. Then I guess, my dear Victor, we'll see who gets to the finish line first. As Victor turned to leave, a flicker of doubt crossed his face, replaced by a calculated expression. I'll be watching closely, Jake. Don't let me down. The door closed with a definitive thud, reverberating in the now-still studio. Jake felt an electrifying surge, fear mixed with exhilaration. What just happened? Clara breathed, breaking the taut silence that followed. Jake turned to his team, now buzzing with a shared fire, their previously anxious faces lit with a spark. We just made a step towards reclaiming our narrative. It's time to dance our truths, he proclaimed, confidence rippling through him. But beneath that confidence lingered an unspoken question: could they truly challenge Victor's influence? Or was it merely a facade hiding their own inadequacies? As rehearsals resumed, the atmosphere shifted. Stories began to intertwine with movement, the dancers pushing boundaries even beyond their own expectations. Yet with each practice session, Jake felt the gnawing pressure of Victor's ominous words. Was their passion genuine enough to impress an audience rooted in materialism? The shadows of uncertainty crept around the edges of his focus even as creativity surged. He needed to channel this rising tension into positioning their performance as a beacon of authenticity, a compelling force that spoke beyond the dance floor. But as he prepared to lead them into their next rehearsal, an unexpected message dinged on his phone, an invitation from a high-profile critic, and a warning. The stakes were rising higher, and Jake could feel the weight of the impending challenges knitting even tighter around his dreams. The question hung in the air. Was this truly their moment, or merely a precursor to a greater loss? Jake stared at the glowing notification on his phone, his pulse quickening as he processed the invitation from the high-profile critic. The name alone sent a shiver down his spine. This was the type of exposure he had long desired, but always approached with a cautious mix of excitement and dread. Was this critic genuinely interested in his work, or merely scouting for a reason to tear it apart? The studio felt charged, pulsating with the energy of his dancers as they stretched and rehearsed. Their stories had started to seep into their movements, transforming the choreography into a personal narrative. They were hungry for validation, craving an acknowledgement of their truth. But was their truth enough to pierce the thick veneer of a critical professional elite steeped in materialism? As he gathered the dancers around, Jake noticed the tension crackling like static electricity. Each face was a panorama of hope and fear. He needed to direct that energy not just towards the performance, but toward confronting their collective apprehensions. Listen, everyone, he began, pausing to meet each gaze. We've got an opportunity. A critic is coming to see us. Gasps filled the air, but he raised a palm, pushing through the burst of excitement. This isn't just about impressing someone who may judge us. This is our chance to be seen not just for our skill, but for our story. A flicker of doubt crossed Clara's face. What if they don't see it? What if it all falls flat? Just beyond apprehension, Jake sensed an unyielding determination. Then we pivot. We take that experience and learn from it. Art isn't about perfect outcomes. It's about the journey. Each session we've had, all the emotions we've woven into our dances, that's what counts. With each sentence, The uncertainty began to dissolve. The reflective looks in their eyes turned resolute as Jake continued to expound upon the ethos of their dance. We're not here to please a single critic. We're here to share the raw narratives that connect us, the footfalls of our hopes and struggles. Dancers nodded, some murmuring their agreement, the fear marginally replaced by an awakening passion. They gathered closer, fueled by the shared knowledge that their work would transcend superficial critiques if they infused it with honesty and grit. However, as the rehearsal commenced anew, Jake could still feel Victor's taunts resonating in the back of his mind. He wrestled with the fear that lingered like a ghost, threatening to undermine their progress. Could authenticity withstand the facades of influence that pervaded their art? He watched the dancers enact their stories' moments of joy, sorrow, anguish, and exhilaration. Their lines were flowing with cathartic energy, yet Jake noticed an unsettling rhythm emerging. It felt as if they were all trying to please him instead of connecting with one another. An idea sparked a risk that could deepen their understanding and camaraderie. "Let us take a few minutes to work in pairs," he declared, the impulse dictating his next steps. One dancer shares their story while the other listens and then translates that tale into movement. No choreography, just raw emotion. A ripple of hesitation swept through the space before it morphed into animated chatter. Clara quickly paired with Mia. Jake could see the gears shifting as vulnerability unfolded. He utilized the moment to step back. As he watched, a sense of peace enveloped him. This was the manifestation of their authenticity, a visceral connection he had longed for. With each dancer unfolding their narrative, Jake felt a subtle, yet profound shift within himself. He was no longer just the leader aiming to prove a point to Victor. He was a catalyst for personal growth, witnessing his dancers discover strength in exposing their vulnerabilities. By the end of their improvisation session, the atmosphere shifted from uncertainty to empowerment. The rehearsal room echoed with an invigorated sense of purpose. But in the thrill of this progress, the harsh reality loomed closer. The critic's presence was drawing near. Jake's heart raced as he considered the implications of both their recent revelations and the impending performance. Would it be enough to transform the audience's perceptions, or would he find himself battling deeper fears the moment they stepped under those glaring lights? As they wrapped up and the dancers fanned out wearing newfound confidence, Jake pulled out his phone, the reflection illuminating his resolve. He was ready to face the challenge ahead, but still unsure if he could withstand the critical gaze that awaited them. The moment of truth hung tantalizingly within reach. How would authenticity measure against criticism? Jake paced the studio, his mind a tempest of thoughts as he replayed the day's rehearsal. An undeniable shift had occurred. The dancers had uncovered layers of authenticity he had hoped for, but the impending performance haunted him. Would it translate? The blinking cursor on his laptop thrummed against the backdrop of silence, reminding him that he needed to draft a statement for the critic attending their performance. Each keystroke echoed his doubts. How could he articulate the raw essence of the dance without falling back into cliches? He couldn't simply state that they were sharing their stories. He had to invoke something deeper. Absently, he ran a hand through his hair, frustration simmering beneath the surface. "I have to get this right," he murmured to himself. "This isn't just about me or my vision. It's about them." He paused, realizing that as he battled his own expectations, he might be imposing a different kind of pressure on his dancers. The door flung open, and Clara entered, a light drafting behind her. "Hey, Jake. I was wondering if we could talk about the performance strategy." Her enthusiasm was palpable, almost infectious. However, he could see a nervous beat behind her bright eyes. "Yeah, of course," he replied, shaking off his internal chaos like dust from his shoulders. "What's on your mind?" "I think it could help if we loosened up a bit, maybe allowed for some moments of improvisation even during the performance, like we did in rehearsal," Clara suggested, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. This was the kind of insight he needed. "That's a brilliant idea. Why confine the performance when we can embrace the spontaneity that's already there?" As they discussed the potential for weaving improvisation within the set structure, Jake found himself leaning into the conversation more. Clara's perspective illuminated a part of himself he had overlooked, the part craving greater connection not only with the dancers, but also with the art itself. After their session, Jake sat alone, contemplating Clara's idea further. He realized that improvisation could serve both as a technique and as a metaphor for life unpredictable, raw, and full of opportunity. The pressure to perform under scrutiny became less daunting as he understood that the dance itself could be a living dialogue, an exchange that flowed dynamically between the dancers and the audience. The next day, Jake initiated a fresh round of rehearsals with a renewed sense of purpose. "Let us embrace vulnerability," he announced. "We're going to outline our performance, but allow room for improvisation. Follow your instincts in the moment." The expressions that followed were a mixture of apprehension and excitement. Jake recognized that fear still plucked at their heartstrings, but now it was infused with an air of challenge. It was no longer just about being good enough. It was about creating something genuine, something that could evolve even as the performance unfolded. With each iteration, Jake felt not just the dancers transforming, but himself as well. The impending performance no longer loomed as a judgment on his capabilities. Instead, it morphed into a milestone for their collective growth. Still, he knew the critic would arrive with a sharpened pencil, ready to dissect their vulnerable truths on the evening of the performance. He felt anxiety curling within him. As the dancers warmed up backstage, he absorbed their energy, the flickering anticipation, the palpable nervousness, the shared sense of discovery. This wasn't merely a spectacle. It was a canvas of their raw emotions laid bare. As the curtain prepared to rise, Jake steeled himself one last time. Doubt still whispered that maybe he hadn't prepared well enough. But now it was almost comforting. It reminded him that they were treading into uncharted territory together. Just as the lights dimmed, a shadow fell over Jake's thoughts. The critic was not only there to judge, but also to interpret the unveiling of authenticity. The momentum surged, and Jake stood, determined as the stage became theirs, alive with possibility. But would their unchained vulnerability translate to something remarkable? Would the critic's response resonate with the truth they sought to express? Or would it all crumble under scrutiny? The answer awaited just beyond the curtains. The air was electric in the theater as Jake stood just off stage, muscles tense with anticipation. As the curtain rose, the spotlight bathed his dancers in a warm glow, each one embodying the essence of raw emotion ready to spill into the audience. Yet, his mind wrestled with the thought of how the critic would receive their opening. It wasn't merely performance, it was an exploration. He shifted his weight, feeling every gaze in the dimly lit auditorium and energy that buzzed with expectation, both from the audience and the dancers. This was their moment. Just as he had urged them to embrace the unknown, he too needed to surrender to the flow of the performance. As the dancers began to move, each step fueled by their personal stories, Jake's heart raced. He stood still for a moment, eyes fixating on Clara, who danced like a wild flame, radiating a freedom he yearned to articulate. But instead of panicking, he focused. He detached himself, no longer Jake the choreographer, but Jake the witness. This shift granted him clarity. The critic's expectations faded slightly in the face of such authentic artistry unfolding before him. With every passing moment, he felt as if he were discovering a hidden part of himself. The pressure of judgment began to dissipate, replaced by an understanding that this performance was about collective vulnerability. He watched as improvisational moments blossomed, turning planned sequences into thrilling exchanges. There was a myriad of emotions: fear, joy, sorrow, all expressed in a language that transcended words. But then, midway through, a dancer lost their footing, teetering dangerously close to the edge of the stage. The audience held its breath, and for a harrowing moment, time froze for Jake. He couldn't interject. He was merely an observer. Yet in that split second, Clara caught the dancer's eye, and the two shared a heartbeat. Rather than retreat, the dancer pivoted and flowed seamlessly into a new movement that blended with Clara's improvised passage. The audience erupted in applause, astonished not only by the choreography, but also by the fluidity of human connection in motion. Jake's heart swelled, but with it came a storm. The vulnerability they had invited in was now exposed for everyone to observe. Would a misstep, this moment of imperfection, shatter their narrative? As the performance continued, Jake grappled with the idea that failure could be welcomed, could be part of their story. The dancers embraced unexpected expressions, bending the expectations of both the audience and themselves. The climactic moment erupted in a flurry of artistry, with exhilarating transitions that left the audience breathless. Jake could hear the intensity of the applause echoing in his chest, a reminder that authenticity resonated deeper than perfection. Finally, as the final notes hung in the air, the dancers stood in a tableau of vulnerability and strength. Time stretched for a heartbeat, and then it burst forth in applause. An exhilarating release swept through him. They had done it. They had created an experience that felt real, alive. Yet, even amidst this excitement, a gnawing worry surfaced. The critic's opinion loomed like a shadow. Would this authenticity break through their usual frameworks? Would it be enough? As they stood for their bows, Jake scanned the theater for the familiar silhouette of the critic. The instinct to know their reaction consumed him. Would the next chapter be written in accolades or harsh critique? Jake felt the immediacy of the unknown surge within him, intensifying his resolve. They had defied expectations tonight, but tomorrow would bring a reckoning. As Jake turned to his dancers, ready to rebuild their courage for what lay ahead, he realized that perhaps the struggle was not to find acceptance, but to allow the freedom of discovery within the unknown. Would the fear of judgment continue to stifle their artistry, or would it ignite a new spark of exploration together? The answer loomed with the sunrise. As dawn broke, Jake lingered in the soft light of the studio, a serene contrast to the storm brewing within him. The echo of last night's applause still reverberated in his ears, yet anticipation gnawed at his insides. Today, the critics' review would drop, a definitive moment that could either catapult them into acclaim or expose their raw edges under an unforgiving lens. His dancers filtered in, their expressions a complex tapestry of excitement and trepidation. Clara, her energy still crackling, approached him, a bright contrast against the chill of uncertainty. Last night was magic, she said, her voice charged with possibility. But even as she spoke, a flicker of doubt passed through her eyes. Jake observed her closely. She, like him, was caught between hope and fear. Did they dare to believe in the authenticity they had shared? He decided then that it was time to shift his leadership style. No longer would he simply orchestrate movements. He would nurture their collective growth. Let us reflect before the day's reactions hit, he suggested, surprising himself with his own conviction as they gathered in a circle, their bodies intertwined with the remnants of last night's performance. Jake encouraged them to share what the experience had meant to them personally. One by one, insights emerged, fragility mixed with strength, moments of connection where improvisation had birthed confidence. The room filled with voices, weaving the vulnerability of their individual journeys into a tapestry of shared courage. Jake took in these revelations, the weight of their stories morphing into a catalyst for his growth. He realized that the fear of criticism was not solely his burden. It was a shared anxiety among the dancers. And just as they had danced through uncertainty, he needed to confront his fears head-on. What if the critic condemned their work? Did it diminish the profound experience they shared? Seizing the moment, he shared his reservations. I'm afraid of how we'll be received, he admitted. But last night proved that authenticity can speak louder than accolades. His words hung in the air, igniting a spark among the dancers. In that moment, Clara leaned forward, challenging the narrative. What if we turn the critic's perspective into our fuel? Let us not seek their approval, but rather showcase our journey unapologetically. The clarity of her statement struck a chord within Jake. He felt emboldened, not just by her words, but by the collective power of the group's resolve. Jake began mapping their next performance, an act that would incorporate their authentic stories with newfound courage. They would embrace risk, create a narrative that flowed from perception to creation. The thought invigorated him, infusing him with a sense of purpose. As the clock ticked closer to the critic's reveal, anticipation mingled with urgency. Would they see the artistry and vulnerability, or merely focus on missteps? The answer would shape not only the course of their careers, but also their understanding of what it meant to be true artists. With a refreshed spirit, Jake gathered the dancers, ready to embark on this new chapter. Together, let us create a performance that declares who we are, failures and all. He felt the conviction in every syllable, unifying them in a singular mission. But just as he lifted his gaze, a notification flashed across his phone, an update from the critic. The moment of truth had arrived with staggering immediacy. Jake paused, heart pounding as he prepared to face the judgment that would either elevate or challenge everything they dared to create. Would his growing sense of identity withstand this test? Jake's finger hovered over the screen, the notification mere seconds away from revealing everything he had worked towards. He felt the room sway with his anxiety. A collective breath held, as if the very air demanded silence. All around, the dancers exchanged nervous glances, their hopes woven into the fabric of their shared experience. This wasn't just about a critique. It was about their identities, their artistry, and the value of their vulnerability. With a deep breath, Jake opened the notification. The critic's words unfolded like a blade, slicing through the silence, both electrifying and suffocating. Raw yet lacking polish. The potential is there, but the sentence trailed off into a labyrinth of feedback, dissecting their performance with a scalpel's precision. Each line pierced Jake's resolve, making him question every choice he had made in the choreography and every breath his dancers had spent on stage. He felt the weight of his responsibility, the burden of expectation. Clara's hand landed on his shoulder, grounding him. "We did something real," she reminded him softly. "Don't let one voice drown out so many others." Her courage ignited a flicker of defiance within him. Jake closed his eyes, seeking balance amid the chaos. He could choose to obsess over the critic's words, allow them to define his worth and that of his dancers. Or he could embrace this as a pivotal moment of growth, not just for the group, but for himself. "I can't focus solely on validation," he declared, turning to face the ensemble. "Yes, we received criticism, but we also took risks that showcased who we are. We can learn, adapt, and push boundaries." Their response was instantaneous, a ripple of affirmation that morphed doubt into determination. Clara stepped forward, eyes aflame with possibility. "Let us do something more. A performance that flips these opinions on their head." At that moment, her suggestion resonated as not merely a challenge, it became a mission, a collective call to action. They promised to dive deeper, transforming remarks that seemed like setbacks into stepping stones. Over the next few days, Jake restructured their rehearsals. He transformed the studio into a vibrant sanctuary for risk-taking. No more safe movements or predictable sequences. He invited the dancers to bring their own stories and emotions into the choreography, pushing them even further out of their comfort zones. It was time to embrace discomfort, to make their authenticity not just a facet of their art, but its very foundation. Jake found himself reflecting more critically on his own creative process. He needed to embrace his insecurities too, recognizing them as part of the journey towards mastery. He learned to navigate doubts and vulnerabilities without shying away but confronting them. This wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about having the courage to be oneself. As sweat dripped from their brows during intense rehearsals, the dynamics transformed. Clara's daring ideas became focal points, while the timid dancers began to discover voices they had long silenced. Jake witnessed them embracing risks and exploration that sparked fresh ideas and ignited their creativity. Their movements became bolder, the narratives richer. Days turned into weeks, and the impending performance loomed on the calendar. Jake felt exhilarated, but the stakes continued to rise. What if their growth didn't resonate? What if they failed to connect with an audience that had such high expectations of them? Then an email arrived that turned everything upside down. The critic was back, but now there was a challenge tied to a prestigious gala, a chance to have their revamped dance showcased before a new audience. Jake read the email twice. This opportunity could either solidify their evolution or expose their raw edges all over again. The stage was set, an electrifying combination of hope and anxiety coursed through him. On the brink of their most audacious endeavor, Jake greeted the dancers with the knowledge that they were no longer bound by fear. They were ready to redefine what it meant to perform. "Let us turn this challenge into our greatest narrative yet," Jake proclaimed, feeling a new grip on his identity as a leader. The momentum shifted, weaving an exhilarating path of personal and professional triumphs just ahead. The real test was coming, and it was time to step into the spotlight, unapologetically bold. But as they began to stretch and take their positions for rehearsal, Jake couldn't shake the feeling, what if the critics were right? Would their transformation be enough to silence the doubts still echoing in the back of his mind? In the days leading up to the gala, Jake felt an internal storm brewing, a tempest fueled by doubt and possibility. He wrestled with conflicting emotions, the burning desire to prove himself and the paralyzing fear of failure that whispered incessantly. The juxtaposition of exhilaration and anxiety became a constant companion, threading through each rehearsal like an uninvited guest. Their dance had evolved into something spectacular, a tapestry woven from the raw threads of their authentic experiences. Clara's spontaneity transformed into choreography that pulsated with life, urging even the more reserved dancers to relinquish their hesitations. They were tapping into a reservoir of creativity that Jake hadn't realized existed. Still, every twist and turn in the dance felt like navigating a tightrope, the abyss of public opinion threatening to pull them down with each misstep. Jake observed each dancer, their bodies a reflection of tumultuous growth, each movement speaking volumes about their individual journeys. A few dancers had stepped into the spotlight with newfound confidence, while others struggled to trust their instincts. Jacob recognized the urgent need to balance the process. The stakes were heightened, and the emotional weight of the impending performance amplified the pressure. One evening after practice, alone in the studio, Jake faced a mirror, his own reflection staring back with an intensity that unnerved him. He asked himself probing questions. What truth was he trying to convey through this performance? Whose expectations were weighing him down? He could feel the critic's words gnawing at his self-worth, yet nestled beneath them lay a resounding truth. This dance was not merely an exhibit for judgment. It was a celebration of their journey, a gift to themselves as much as to the audience. With clarity returning, he resolved to convey that gift through the performance, a reflection of their collective struggles, victories, and boldness. He was not merely the leader. He was a conduit for their stories. Inspired, Jake gathered the dancers for a heartfelt discussion that would shift their focus. He shared his doubts, exposing the cracks in his own armor. It was in this moment of vulnerability that they all recognized the strength inherent in honesty. Let us own every moment of this performance, Jake advised passionately. We're here to invite the audience into our world. Let them feel our fears, our failures, and our triumphs. Let us embrace the journey, imperfections, and all. Echoes of encouragement surged amongst the group as they resonated with his words. The atmosphere transformed, mingling hope with a sense of collective responsibility. No longer were they just performers. They were co-creators, interconnected in their vulnerability and ambition. As the gala approached, Jake took a more active role in shaping the final edit of the choreography. This was no longer just his vision, but a beautiful collaboration of diverse insights. Clara's innovative stage ideas merged with the intricate narratives brought forth by the dancers, creating a powerful narrative arc that flowed throughout. But as they delved deeper, Jake's internal conflict reemerged. Was he ready to present this raw representation of their combined human experience? What if the critic at the gala could only see the cracks, not the beauty in their imperfectly woven story? Each night, he revisited the mirror, wrestling with the duality of leadership, confidence, and uncertainty entwined. Maybe this vulnerability, this admission of imperfection was what made the performance most worthwhile. It was not the accolades that would define their success, but the journey they had taken together as a cast. Finally, the night arrived. The stage was set, the lights blazed down like a star-filled sky, and Jake felt the pulse of the audience like a heartbeat. Could they transcend their fears, translating their growth into motion? As they took their places, he felt a commingling of excitement and anxiety. This was at the culmination of their journey, but beneath that perfectionist veneer, a flicker of apprehension lingered. He took a deep breath, poised to release all of those fears into the dance. But just before the music began, an unexpected figure entered through the side door, a prominent rival choreographer who had been a long-standing critic of Jake's work. The man's presence sent a jolt of uncertainty through him. What if this was more than just an observer? What if he was there to undermine everything they had built? Jake's heart raced, but he squared his shoulders, rising to meet the moment. Could this truly be the performance that defined them all? As the first notes echoed through the auditorium, Jake realized he had one ultimate truth to embrace. It was time to face not just the audience, but also his own reflection in that mirror of ambition and vulnerability. The moment of life-altering revelations had arrived, and every heartbeat thudded with tremendous potential. With a deep breath, Jake gathered himself, shifting the intensity of his focus away from doubt and toward the energy building in the room around him. This was not just a performance. It was a testament to growth, resilience, and authenticity. As the music ignited the air, he felt an unexpected calm wash over him. It was time to unleash not only their stories, but also his OWNAS. The dancers took the stage. Their movements were imbued with a newfound confidence, a panoply of emotions and narratives intertwining seamlessly. Clara was at the forefront, embodying the fierce spirit of creativity they had ignited together. Each dancer followed suit, their collective energy pulsating in synchronization with the rhythm, crafting a breathtaking tapestry of vulnerability and strength. In this moment, Jake was no longer a mere choreographer. He was a maestro, orchestrating this living, breathing expression raised from vulnerability. Their joint journey transformed the stage into a landscape of shared truths, where every misstep was embraced as part of their path toward authenticity. The audience witnessed not just choreography, but a visceral chronicle of struggles and triumphs that resonated deeply. Midway through their performance, the unexpected happened. Clara stepped forward, coaxing an improvised flurry of movements, prompting the others to join her in their own spontaneous bursts of expression. This moment of deviation from the planned choreography breathed a fresh air of life into the performance. Instead of criticism, the audience erupted into cheers, captivated by the dancer's openness. The critic and the rival choreographer watched intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. Jake could sense a palpable change. The energy in the room pulsed with unfiltered curiosity. Was the critic beginning to understand? This wasn't just about perfection. This was human experience laid bare. As the performance neared its climax, Jake felt the crescendo of emotion wash over him. He had transformed as a leader, not only guiding others, but becoming intertwined in this narrative of shared authenticity. The culmination of their stories resonated throughout the auditorium, a raw embrace of imperfection that evoked an overwhelming sense of unity. The applause grew thunderous, enveloping them in an electric embrace. When the final movement landed in stillness, the audience erupted in a wave of standing ovation, and the weight of fear fell away, replaced by a tide of overwhelming validation. Jake stood alongside his dancers, their shared triumph tangible in the air. They had not just performed, they had conquered the barriers imposed on them, redefining the notions of success and artistry woven around them. In the aftermath, as the lights dimmed, Jake felt victorious not merely for the applause, but for the transformation he had undergone alongside his dancers. He had not allowed fear to dictate their narratives. Instead, he embraced the power of storytelling. This journey led him to a profound realization. Authenticity transcends validation and fear, becoming a foundation of true artistry. Days later, the critic's review landed. A triumphant display of authenticity, raw, engaging, and entirely human. The words flowed through Jake like a healing balm, affirming the narrative they had crafted together. It was clear, their stories mattered, and their courage to embrace vulnerability had paid off. Jake had achieved something deeper than acknowledgement. He had reclaimed his identity as a leader who fostered growth and empowerment in others. He had transformed from a self-doubting instructor into a force of nature, one who inspired not only through dance, but through the act of living authentically. With renewed vigor, he prepared for the next adventure, knowing now that his success would always be interwoven with the authenticity of those around him. He stood tall, ready to conquer whatever came next, armed with the irrefutable understanding that true artistry could never be measured by mere applause, but by the power of connection and the strength of their shared journeys. Jake felt that spark ignite within him once more, a solid confidence rooted not in accolades, but in purpose. He had proven to himself, to Victor, and to the world that vulnerability is strength, and that art's essence lies in its ability to reflect the unapologetic truths of human experience. Now was the moment a new chapter awaited. With the embers of their triumph still glowing, Jake resolved to share their journey, their lessons, and their growth with the world, an authentic narrative that would inspire and empower others to embrace their stories unapologetically. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.